I wanted to introduce our first speaker for the day, Nancy Goodman. She's the executive director of an organization called Kids v. Cancer, which she started after her son died of medulloblastoma. And they have done incredible work. Nancy is a lawyer. She also has a degree in public policy, and those things have come in very handy. She's done a lot of incredible advocacy work in Washington. She lives locally with her husband and her 2 surviving children. So she has done a lot of work with Congress here, and we're going to hear all about that. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And one other thing I wanted to say about Nancy is that I told you about that conference that I went to almost exactly a year ago, where I first heard about CHIP and first talked to CHIP. That's where I met Nancy too. So it was probably, before this one of the best conferences I've ever been to. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Katherine.
So let's start. If you could just tell us about your experience. Tell us a little bit about how you started the foundation.
Sure. Well, thank you. First of all, I just want to say I'm so touched and honored that you all would think of being here for me. And as you have questions, please raise your hands. I want to talk about what's interesting to all of you. So my story starts 10 years ago. I was living actually in Manhattan. I had 2 little kids. I was a stay-at-home mom. I am trained as a lawyer, but I wasn't working at the time. And my son Jacob was a normal, healthy, cute, and annoying 8-year-old boy. And he started having morning nausea and vomiting. He was diagnosed with the pediatric brain cancer. He had emergency brain surgery upon diagnosis. And he was never the same again. He was a profoundly ill kid for 2 years before he died. We spent 9 months in the hospital. He had unmanaged pain. He was in a diaper. He was spastic. He was in a wheelchair. He had cognitive deficiencies from cranial spinal radiation. He couldn't speak for a while, and then he spoke in a very unnaturally slow and high-pitched manner, which was very off-putting to other kids, as you can imagine. He was anorexic. He was just terrible. And then he died. And you know, all of us are in this crazy world where we are parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or loved ones of kids who, you know, aren't healthy. And it's just a really terrible, unexpected place to be, right? And I do believe that it makes all of us really into superheroes, even if we don't feel like it. In my case, what happened was Jacob died on a Friday morning, 1 January, and just Saturday morning, I put my laptop on my kitchen table and I said, you know, what am I going to do now? And I started Kids v. Cancer. So I'm a lawyer, and so what I know how to do, or what I couldn't learn how to do, was legislative, and that was what I could contribute to this, because I'm a nerd, you know. I'm not good at raising money or reaching out to people. But there was a law on the books that I had read about called the Tropical Disease Priority Review Voucher Program. And it had been passed in 2007, and it didn't work. But the purpose was to create incentives so that companies would develop tropical disease drugs. And the problem is that, you know, people who have tropical diseases live in developing countries, and they don't have money to pay for them, so there's no opportunity for return on investment for the pharmaceutical industry. And that's the same problem that kids with cancer or kids with DADA2 have. There's just not enough of them to create a sufficient market for companies to develop drugs for our kids. So I took that law. I spent a year interviewing pharmaceutical executives, lawyers, policymakers, venture capitalists, about what they thought could possibly be the reasons this didn't work. Most people said, it's just a stupid idea, it's not going to work. And I said, well, it's all I have. I'm just going to spend time doing it. And so I had 6 fixes to it. And I approached a law firm, and I became a pro bono client. And we wrote the bill together, me and this adorable 25-year-old kid. It was his first bill. And it was, I've never written a bill before. I mean, what the heck did I know about that, right? Just because you go to law school doesn't mean you can write a bill. But it's like, you know, when your kid is sick, you'll do absolutely anything, right? And I spent a year and a half. I had 500 meetings on the Hill. I had never lobbied in my entire life we moved to DC after Jacob died for my husband's job. And we had like no slush funds or anything like that. I had myself and I had this kid, this adorable 24-year-old intern who was a pediatric cancer survivor. We just went office to office for 2 years, and we got 172 co-sponsors, both sides of the aisle, and we got it passed. And it has created $1 billion of R&D incentives for pediatric rare disease drug development since 2012.
Can you explain how the voucher program works?
Sure. So, and by the way, I mean, every step was terrifying. Every step I thought, what am I doing? I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, every step was something new. The way it works is this. So the way it works is that if a company develops a drug for pediatric cancer, or maybe DADA2, I don't actually know if DADA2 falls within the new definition because I don't know how the FDA would interpret it. But if a company develops a drug for a life-threatening disease for a child, and we have to find out if DADA2 applies, then the FDA gives the company a voucher, okay? And the company can use or sell the voucher. So the company will likely sell the voucher to a major pharmaceutical company, like, for example, Pfizer. Pfizer may have a blockbuster heart disease drug that it's racing to market. And Pfizer buys the voucher, and it can exercise the voucher. By exercising the voucher, it will take its unapproved, say, heart disease drug, and it will receive faster FDA review on that heart disease drug. And by receiving faster FDA review, assuming that drug is approved, it will get to market many months faster. And that's worth a lot to Pfizer. So how much is it worth? Well, the last voucher sold for $350 million. And so companies, you know, and the thing is, companies developing pediatric cancer drugs, or perhaps DADA2 drugs, I don't know, or other drugs related to your kids' diseases, are mostly like, you know, thinly capitalized startups or like scientists with a dream, right? And they can take this potential for a voucher and they can fundraise off of it. What they can do is very early in the drug development process, there's an application they can make to the FDA where the FDA reviews and says, yes, DADA2, we have to find out, Katherine, I'll help you figure out, is the kind of disease that would merit a voucher. And if the answer is yes, the company can take that information so that if the company's drug is approved, they receive a voucher, and can take that information and use it for fundraising purposes. Because potential investors, they know how to assess the likelihood that a drug will be approved. But if they take that probability and then they incorporate the probability of a voucher, which increases the market cap, then suddenly you have a revenue stream to finance the drug development. And so that's really the structure, and that's the opportunity.
So tell us about after it was you and your intern, your
and my
organization
babysitter and my 6-year-old.
Right, there you go. So, but it got bigger after that.
Not a lot bigger.
Not a lot bigger.
Yes. You know. So now right now we have, we're not a lot bigger than that, frankly. It's only 4 of us. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Kids versus Cancer, we have another bill in front of Congress now that would require companies developing drugs by molecular target also to develop them for kids. We hope that the next Congress will approve it in June of 2016. One thing we found, Katherine, is that we're really, you know, you pick one thing that you can do and that you like to do, and you just do that, you know. And I try to work with other, you know, in the pediatric cancer space, we have a lot of turf battles, and we're all stepping over each other's toes, and everyone wants to be like the big umbrella organization. And I find that like what's best is that you figure out what you can do, and you just do that. It's like, I'm a lawyer, and so I'm just writing legislation, because now I know how to do that in lobby, and I don't do anything else. I don't do like massive lobby days. Other groups do that. I don't do awareness campaigns. I don't do fundraising. I don't do patient support. I don't do research. We just do that. And that's how we are effective, because we're really small, but everyone on my team is part of how we're going to write legislation and how we're going to get it passed. We do the insider stuff, so how we're going to create relationships with members of Congress and their staff. And then we work with other pediatric groups who actually do the grassroots pieces.
Right. So that seems like the number one reason that you've been so successful is that sense of focus. What do you wish you'd done differently? What have you learned that you can share with us so we don't make the same mistakes?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's incredible what you've done so far. And I think I just want to get back to this point, Katherine. We in the pediatric cancer community, like, we could be so much more effective if we worked better together. And we turf battle all the time. And it has, people spend half their energy being upset that someone else is doing something or mistrust. And, what I wish we all, and I'm learning too, right? I mean, I'm focusing more too. I wish we all learned earlier, just like take one incredibly narrow piece. Because we're all amateurs, right? All of us in this room. Like, I don't pay myself either, by the way. You don't have time in your life to, you're not spending 100 hours a week doing. So just spend one really narrow, pick something super narrow and do it so well that it's done, right? And you'll feel this incredible sense of accomplishment. And that's what I really wish I did. So we have now 2 or 3 different competing umbrella groups in the pediatric cancer space. And we spend half our time fighting with each other, who's going to get the meetings and what we're going to do. And it's kind of heartbreaking. So that's one thing I wish we did better. And one thing that's kind of really great that's happening now is some people in our community are fabulous at graphic design, and it totally makes a difference. Their ability to use that talent to create awareness campaigns with others is so powerful compared to the really amateur crummy stuff we had before. And other people are amazing photographers, and it's so powerful what they're doing, and it's so much better than my little my little iPhone that I was doing with my kids. It was just terrible. And other people are beautiful writers, and some people, and a lot of folks just want to fundraise $25 or $35 or $100,000 and just go do policy. You can't do that. You got to either fundraise or do policy. You can't. I feel like you have to learn how to fundraise really well. I think it's all amazing that you all came here together to do this. You have so much. You really can change the world for your kids. And since we started, it's amazing, things are really changing in pediatric cancer. My goal is for pediatric cancer drug development to proceed at the same pace as adult drug cancer development. And I think within a year we'll have the Creating Hope Act reauthorized. I hope we have the Race for Children Act passed. We're also working now with FDA and NIH on eligibility requirements, and maybe this is a DADA2 issue. And by the way, if anybody sort of wants to focus on regulatory issues, I'll work with you. And the question is, a lot of adult trials have 18 as the minimum age of eligibility. It's just standard practice. And so I'm asking the question, why? Why are we discriminating against kids? If there's no scientific rationale for excluding kids, maybe that's not the right thing to do. So we're going to get kids on all sorts of trials as a result.
That's amazing. You've done incredible work. So there's a lot more to do.
There's so much more to do.
Yeah. So can you talk through a couple of the biggest pieces of legislation that affect rare diseases more generally that are in Congress right now, just so that people have an overview?
So the question is why would a company develop a drug for DADA2, right? And why would they do it now? And what is happening legislatively that may make it more easy for them to do? So one thing is NIH funding is really important. And I think, but I don't know whether the Creating Hope Act applies or not. And the third is there's a bill called the Open Act. And what that says is that if a company takes a drug that's already approved and develops it for a rare disease, takes a drug that's already approved and does some tests for rare disease, and they get 2 extra months of marketing exclusivity on their adult indication. So what that means, marketing exclusivity is functionally the same thing as patent protection. So they get 2 extra months where they can have premium pricing on their drug.
That's something that we're looking at with Humira, because that's sort of happening.
So there are pros and cons to that bill. So first of all, politically, where's that bill? In the current Congress, which will conclude on December 31st, to be honest with you, it has some support in the House and doesn't have support in the Senate. And I don't know what's going to happen in the next Congress. I think from your perspective, there are pros and cons to that. The pro is like maybe you'll get companies to do more studies. But the cons are maybe you're getting the studies done anyway, and once they're done, the prices of these drugs for your kids will skyrocket. Mm-hmm. So like it may or may not be the right solution. But then the other thing, which I think is something that we as a community need to talk about, is there's a lot of. But then the question is like, what, from my perspective, are premium prices for drugs a problem or not a problem, and how do we think about them as a society? And in the pediatric cancer world, when kids are prescribed premium price drugs, we have amazing social workers in our clinics who get our insurance companies to cover it most of the times. And so, I don't know whether that's the case for your kids, and if not, like maybe there's someone in the room who wants to start working on that issue. But since that's the case, I would argue that premium prices in and of itself are not a problem for kids with rare diseases. And maybe you got to give companies an opportunity to charge like $300,000, $400,000 per year of treatment so that they at least go in the market, right? And then we have to create a political mandate for insurance companies to cover insurance for those drugs when truly we do need it for R&D. And I think that's something as a community we need to talk about, whether we want to go there or not. I mean, it's a very politically charged area. But I think as long as our kids, and I think a lot of insurance companies will pay for it if it's for a kid and if it's for a really rare disease.
Mm-hmm. It'll be really interesting to see how all that plays out.
I think even if premium prices are, obviously there are some, like our EpiPens, like why are those $600 a month? That's terrible, right? To me, that's abuse, right, of people who really need drugs. But we need to separate that from spaces like DADA2 and pediatric cancers where the markets just aren't big enough for companies to go in unless they're going to have sky-high prices on their drugs for a few years. Like, as a society, we've decided that for-profit entities are going to develop drugs for our kids. So since we decided that, we got to give them a chance to make some reasonable risk-adjusted returns on investment.
Right. So I'd like to see if anyone else has questions for you. Does anyone have questions?
Any specific drug company that you know of that's working on any of this?
I don't. But again, just talking also about how narrow I am, like that's not even what I do. There are other people in the pediatric cancer community who end up working with companies on what they want to do. And I feel like we only have 4 people on our team. All we do is legislation.
Our drug in the Netherlands is paid by the hospital, so we don't pay.
That's even better. I just want to also note another thing. At Kids v. Cancer, we started a compassionate use navigator, and I would offer this to you and your kids. Americans, Europeans don't need it, or you don't need it. You don't need it unless your kids are coming to the U.S. And the way this works is, let's say there ends up being a drug that your physician wants you to give your kid, your child, but either it's premium price and your insurance company won't pay for it, or it's unapproved and there's a clinical trial, but your child can't get on because they're either too young or because they have some other reason that they'd be excluded from the trial. But your physician believes that that drug is in your child's best interest. Just FYI, you can come on to Kids vs. Cancer's website and you can contact us, and we have staff who will work with your physician to help him or her navigate all the requirements so that hopefully they can get that drug to your child. And the physician needs approval from the FDA, from the company, and from your hospital.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that.
For free.
I have a friend that we met at NIH at the Children's there, and her daughter has GM1, which is related to like Tay-Sachs disease. And what they do, as their representatives change, when they come to NIH, they make a trip to Washington, D.C., and meet with their representatives so that they can give their representative a face to put with their rare disease. And they do a little photo op, and then they send it to the local newspaper at home in North Carolina, and it just kind of gives the representative a face to put with their rare disease.
you can definitely do that. I mean, again, I would just say, like, what's your political ask? Why are you spending time doing this versus something else? And if you feel like there's a bill on Capitol Hill that really matters for your kids, absolutely you should do that. And you don't need to talk to your member. You can just talk to their staffers, by the way, and that really matters.
Any other questions?
No other questions?
Okay. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I'm just really touched that you're all here. It's really incredible. And I just really hope that your kids have healthy and happy lives and make friends and feel good about themselves. And, Francis Collins, who's the director of NIH, he spoke last week at a conference, and he said, if my child had a rare disease, I would hope that there was a patient group that was effective on that rare disease, because that's how I feel like drug development and research is occurring these days, that the patient groups are organizing. And so I would just ask all of you, like, don't form 1,000 little different groups and go off on your own way. Like, talk to each other and coordinate and make it easy for drug companies to work with you. And when you pool your funding, make sure you have like enough money that you're actually funding in a way that makes a difference, because there aren't very many of you here in this room. You can do some stuff, but you have to be really focused as a group and as individuals.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Katherine.
Thanks for being here.